Hey, I'm Drake Bell, and this is Yahoo Music. I just want to be an entertainer. I'd like to be seen. I mean, the people that I grew up idolizing are Elvis Presley, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra. And so, and they were just all around entertainers. You know, they made movies, television shows, and they won Oscars and Grammys. Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm trying to redefine myself. I mean, this new record is definitely a different approach musically than I've done before, but it's not something new for me. I mean, this is the music I grew up on. I started listening to rockabilly music and the Stray Cats and Elvis and Carl Perkins and Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran when I was real young, like maybe about 10 or 11. I discovered that music and but when going into making a show on Nickelodeon, doing all this stuff, you kind of can't really play. You think, oh, well, if make a record like this, it's not going to get on the radio. It's not going to get this. I'm doing this now, so making this record, it's not really a reinvention or anything like that. It's kind of just getting back to like what I've always loved to do. So I don't know. I wouldn't say I want to be known for one or the other. I think just being able to entertain people any way I can is my goal. I had it around the house growing up. That was the music my dad would listen to. He was a big Elvis fan, and then you just and I loved the Beatles, and you'd hear the Beatles doing Honey Don't and songs like that, and you'd read on the Carl Perkins on the liner notes like I thought John and Paul wrote everything, and then you find out who Carl Perkins is, and then you find out that whoa, they're doing all this 50s, then you find out Eddie Cochran and Gene Vincent and all the greats, and I've always just loved music. I've been fascinated by it, so and the history of music and everything. So, and I think there was just something about the culture, the hair and the clothes and the cars and the just everything about it just attracted me. So, I've been a fan of Bryan since I was a kid, and I would go to his shows and be that kid standing outside, oh, well, this is his tour bus door. He's got to walk by here, so I'm going to get the autograph and just go into shows after shows and becoming a familiar face, I guess. And when I started working on Drake and Josh, he had kids, and so he would recognize me instead of just being a fan. His kids would be at shows and they would be excited. So that kind of weaseled my way in that way. And I just presented the idea to him one day. I said, I'd love to do something with you musically, a song, an out. Never thinking that he would bite at it. Thinking he would just laugh it off. But when he heard that I wanted to make like a rockabilly kind of rock and roll record, I think that's what got him. He was like, "Wait, you don't want to just go and do some top 40, get with the hot producer of the day, and go do what everybody else is doing?" I was like, "Well, I mean, that's not what I want to do. I want to make this. I want to go on with my guitar and rock. And so he dug the idea, and I was beside myself, like my jaw was on the floor when I heard that he was going to do it. And he flew out to Nashville and worked. He flew his gear out there. I mean, it was such a trip getting into the studio and seeing Brian Setzer's gear and his guitar and his amps and his thing and everything right there. And then he walks in and he's playing on the record and executive produced it and ended up. It was just it was surreal. It was really incredible. Runaway Boys has just been one of my favorite songs growing up. It defines what I'm saying with this record. It's like it's just it's just a rebellious album. It's kind of saying, no, I'm not going to go and use any computers and do what everybody else is doing, and none of my songs say featuring this person and this person and this person and this person, on one song, or you know getting someone to rap on it or anything like that. Like, no, I went in and we rehearsed for 5 days and cut the record live, no click track, no auto tune, nothing like that. And that's really what like Runaway Boys says for me. Lyrically, it's just kind of you know it's kind of a screw everybody kind of song, which I dig. It's kind of very rebellious. And then I Won't Stand in Your Way. That was just growing up. I just loved singing that song, and it was a song I remember just being real, and it was really the pinnacle of Bryan's songwriting. I think it just you hear that song and there's no way that's not a cover from the 1950s. Like, how did Bryan write that? And it was really amazing. We were in the studio and I was working on I Won't Stand in Your Way, and there's a specific solo that Bryan plays in that song that is just so recognizable. The second you hear it, and it's just so sweet. And we were trying to get the tone in the studio, and it just wasn't working. And Bryan called up, and he said, hey, how's it going in the studio? And I go, oh, well, we just can't get the tone for this guitar solo. I want it to sound just like the Stray Cats record, but it's just, we're not getting it. He goes, oh, we'll send the tracks over. I'll play it. I go, what? Whoa. And this is, if you know Bryan, that's very unlike Bryan. Like, for him to do that, that's like, whoa, man. I mean, that's a big thing. And I said, no way. So we sent the tracks over to him. So now we also pressed the album to vinyl. So now I get to take it home, put the needle down, and it's like I'm back in my bedroom when I was 12 years old listening to Bryan Setzer's version and when his guitar comes in, I mean, it's like a complete crazy full circle moment. That's always been, I mean, with my background, obviously coming from a television show where that's always been the first, anytime I work with a label or work with management or anybody, I mean, that's immediately the first thing that they go to. Okay, well, this is what everyone else is doing, so this is what. But when I started on Drake and Josh, there was no Jonas Brothers, there was no Hannah Montana, there was no. We were kind of the first show to incorporate music like that, so there was no factory to go to like they had eventually. So I was able to write all of the music. I wrote the theme song for the show. Any of the songs on the show I wrote. So I was able to always be true to myself artistically. I didn't have to do that. But when the show was over and going into songwriting sessions and working with other people, I mean, everyone's just thinking, okay, top 40 radio, top 40 radio, top 40 radio. Whether it be management or label or songwriters you even have sessions with to write songs, and it just got to be to the point where I envisioned myself on stage with drop crotch pants and trying to do some dance moves, dance routines, and 10 dancers behind me, and my band like way off to the side, and it was not for me. I like to just get up on stage with my guys and throw my guitar around my shoulder and turn up. So I kind of just abandoned that whole idea and went back to what actually got me playing guitar and what got me playing music, what made me fall in love with music, and that's roots rock and roll. It's American rock and roll. That's what I grew up on. Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Also, which is great too, because I mean that's all influenced by American rock and roll. That's the cool thing about the Beatles and the Kinks and all that is you hear, You Really Got Me, and you hear, I mean, even Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. That's what got me into 50s, rock and roll. I mean, it was really only around for about 5 years, the Sun Sessions and all of that stuff. And when I'm listening to the Beatles and all this stuff and hearing these awesome songs and diving deeper and like, okay, who was John Lennon listening to? Who are they listening to? And it all comes back to, the roots of American music, and that's why I love all that British music. That's the coolest thing about making this record and performing it live is having kids come up, and I mean, I've got kids wearing Slipknot shirts and long hair going, man, what do you put in your hair? What do who, man, and they're coming to the shows, the next shows with Elvis t-shirts, and, and they're talking about, oh, I love that song you wrote called Crazy Little Thing Called Love. I'm like, no, check it out, man. That's Freddie Mercury and Queen. Go check this album out. So I'm actually able to introduce all of this music to these kids who were just so deprived musically. I mean, they get in the car, they win the battle over the radio station with their parents, and they're like, okay, we'll put it on top for you. Here you go. There you go. And they have no idea that this music exists. I was lucky to have the influence of my dad, and I grew up in an area where record stores and indie shops. I mean, that was the thing. It was, I grew up, going like this through vinyl and coming home with stacks, and my parents going, what? That's what I had when I was a kid. Why is my son coming home with vinyl? But that's the cool thing, is being able to see all of these kids react to this music. I mean, I come on stage and I'm playing this 50s rock and roll, and they're trying to swing dance. They don't know how to swing dance. But they're spinning each other around, and they're all rocking out, and it's really cool to see. I think it took so long just because it was, there was a lot of, writing music. I mean, I have albums and albums. I write songs all the time, and I constantly produce music. And it was just, there was nothing hitting on, wasn't hitting on anything that were, I mean, there were great songs. I've, killer stuff. But for me, artistically, it was just nothing that really made me excited and want to, get behind, the look and the vibe and the whole thing. And when I got the opportunity to work with Bryan, I mean, I was like, oh man, my first car was a '66 Mustang. My second car was a '61 Galaxy. My parent, you look at pictures of me when I'm 12 years old. I got like pompadours and leather jackets, and my whole room is covered in 1950s paraphernalia, and that was just what I loved. And to be able to revisit that and actually be able to embrace it and go full force with this is like what I've always wanted to do musically. So to be able to do it and have people reacting to it and responding to it has been amazing. So I think that's why I think it's been taking so long. My advice would be, I mean, yeah, Miley has done a good job of it, but there's a it's like prefabricated almost. You can see it's very calculated. It's like very shocking to be so, but if you are just true to yourself artistically and you just kind of, you don't try to be something that you're not ever, then it might take a little longer. But when you get to where you're trying to get to, you're going to be happier. You're going to be more. It's going to be more rewarding to perform the music that you're performing. So I would say, don't do anything to try and be shocking to be shocking. Like, for example, like Bitchcraft just came out of. I mean, that was organic. I actually wrote the song as Witchcraft, and we were all sitting around in a room, and a couple buddies of mine, and a friend of mine just goes, "Man, it should be Bitchcraft." And I was like, "Yeah, ha ha ha." And then I started thinking to myself, I'm like, hey, that's actually kind of cool. There was no calculated, hey, how can we be provocative on this album? Or how can we break out of the Nickelodeon mold? I mean, it was going to go on the album as Witchcraft. So I think if you don't try to prefabricate anything and you're just true to yourself artistically and you do what you love to do, then ultimately you'll be rewarded. And, with this music, I mean, now doing this and being able to really explore it and embrace it, I would rather be doing this down the street tonight at midnight to 20 people than trying to learn some dance moves to play to 300,000 people and not be satisfied artistically. Yahoo!